My name is Shane Lewis. I'm 53 years old. I've traveled to over 70 countries. I've seen poverty on a level most humans can't comprehend during my cultural immersion style of travel. I learned and experienced rock climbing, ice climbing, skydiving, scuba diving, surfing, and snowboarding all over and under our blue planet. I published a book about it all. I wanted to share my unique style and perspectives of my experiences with the world. Most people never get the chance to have these life-changing moments. I branded and starred in the first episode of Naked and Afraid, as well as multiple seasons after S1E1, adding more data points and experiences to an already deeply contemplating mind. Now that sounds a little bit narcissistic, listing my resume in such a manner, though none of us are here to learn about my resume. What you don't know about me is I was born in a trailer park. At age 6, my stepdad and biological mother sent me to a sleepaway reform school without warning and without telling me where we were going. We arrived at the school, and within minutes, my parents drove away, leaving me behind. The only possessions the school permitted me to have was clothes. This 6-year-old wasn't allowed to have any toys for the next 2 years of my life. Now, those of you who are parents in the audience today, try to imagine such a thing. This school had an average age of 14. I instantly had 150 brothers and sisters who all knew each other whom I knew nothing about, all of which are in this institution for varying degrees of delinquency. Now try to imagine the level of bullying these delinquent kids would inflict on a 6-year-old in 1978. There is no way a rotating shift of 3 staff can keep track of all the goings-on in this dormitory life. I was one of 4 kids in the school under the age of 8, me being the youngest of everyone. In an instant, I'm getting food thrown at me during mealtime, smacked in the back of the head, and harassed every time a staff member turns their back. In one instant, I was pulled underneath the water by my feet one day at the pool. For so long, I began swallowing water and even resigned myself that I would die in that moment. With one staff member watching 30-plus kids in a pool, it would be impossible for them to keep track of all of us. I never went back into the pool again during free time swimming. At this point, I began acting out, throwing chairs, being as disruptive as I can. In my mind, it was the only way to exact some revenge. This caused me to be sat down in front of the staff station in a chair with my hands behind my back in plastic handcuffs. It also began to cause a distaste from staff towards me. They had to dedicate so much attention to just me, they began to resent me and turning their backs even more when I was being bullied, causing me to act out even more, creating this endless loop. I started smashing my head against the wall while in timeout. They put a helmet on my head for my safety. During one of my weekend home visits, my mother got so upset with my behavior, she put me in diapers, saying, "If you're going to act like a baby, I'll dress you like a baby." She sent me back to school that night in my diapers and refused to let me take them off. It was no small feat to keep this information from my delinquent brothers upon returning that evening. It wasn't until very late at night that I snuck into the bathroom to remove my diapers that were now well soiled. I buried them into the bottom of the trash can, putting whatever was in the trash can on top to hide the evidence. Imagine a 6-year-old having to process and behave this way. I can't even begin to imagine the level of bullying I would have received if my dormitory's brothers found out about this information. When a child is put into this environment, they are required to see the child psychiatrist a couple times a week. On one of these visits, my shrink asked me to call my parents. Since I didn't memorize my home number, I attempted to call from his office. I began to cry when the operator told me the number was no longer in service. Looking over at my therapist in tears, he just stares at me and asks, "What's wrong?" After informing him, he then tells me my parents' number has been changed. He knew this, and he just watched me like some zoo animal waiting for my reaction. This was my first experience with the sick, twisted mentality of child psychiatrists. From this day forward, this particular psychiatrist and myself no longer had a respectful relationship. There are report cards, so to speak, that I read saying Shane has problems with matriculating with his students, getting poor marks in these categories. However, the same report card says Shane goes to work on time, is a good worker, and takes pride in his work. I'm sorry, I thought child labor law was illegal. Aren't children supposed to be carefree and playing with toys? I also realized by age 7 that there is not one human on earth who really cares about my well-being. This fact would alter my attitude towards adults for the next 12 years. I now have zero respect for all adults. My acting out behavior would now increase. And in an effort to do some type of corporate embarrassment retraining of my attitude, I would need staff to hold my hand when we walked from school to the cafeteria hall or for lunch, or from the dormitory to the cafeteria hall for breakfast and dinner. The staff who resented me the most would refuse to walk me from school to the cafeteria for lunch, often leaving me sitting at the nurse's station during lunch. I can't remember how many lunches I missed those 2 years. The first time I got high was over some holiday weekend that I was not invited home by my parents. Sitting in my timeout chair with one staff member due to the few number of us that were there that weekend, I was given my shoes and asked not to run away if the staff member took us all on a short walk through the woods on the property. An older boy told me to walk behind him and breathe in deeply the smoke he was exhaling as he walked in front of me. It was very relaxing and calmed my mind and heart for this brief time. Thus began my relationship with marijuana. My half-brother was born when I was 8. My parents took me home and I was discharged from the school. I'm very unruly to my parents, as you can imagine, and I was locked into my room often. The rule was when I got locked into my room, I wasn't allowed to play with toys. If my mom caught me playing or heard me playing with toys, she would enter my room and smash anything I was playing with using a hammer. The radio and the New York Yankees baseball broadcast became my best friend. I was kicked out of 3 different public schools during this barely 1.5-year time I was home. Constantly being dropped into new schools with students who have years of knowing each other and I know nothing about them just created more bullying and more acting out by me. Food being thrown at me during cafeteria time was a daily occurrence. I threw chairs at students and punched walls very close to teachers' faces for always taking anybody but my side, causing me to be removed from these schools. At this point, my stepdad gives my mother an ultimatum. It's him or me. From age 9 to 19, I am bounced around 5 different foster homes and 3 more institutional reform schools. The state of Connecticut became my legal guardian. The first foster home I went to was in the inner city of Hartford, Connecticut. I was one of a handful of kids in the school that were white. This created a whole new level of bullying. I was beat up every day for the color of my skin. Bending over to get a drink of water at the hallway water fountain, I would get punched in the stomach, leaving me gasping for air, laying on the ground getting laughed at by the students in the hallway. More food thrown at me during cafeteria times, even had milk cartons dumped over my head. The family moved to Maine, and I was the first child in Connecticut whose legal guardian was the state to move across state lines. The family had other foster kids, so for the first time, I had some mutual connection with another child. They also had a non-relative gentleman who lived with them. Him and I began to develop a friendship. I was just happy that an adult male treated me like I meant something. Late one night while watching TV, he began feeling up my thigh, telling me it was normal to feel tingly, etc. This was the first man to ever show me any compassion. so I let this man do whatever he wanted to me. After being taught how to give a blowjob and being sodomized a few times, I finally told this man no. He denied me the special attention he was giving me after that. No more candy, etc. On another visit home, I found the courage to tell my stepdad what was happening to me. I was brought to another child psychiatrist who, after speaking with me, informed my caseworker and parents I made the whole thing up. He based his diagnosis on me not cowering in the corner, sucking my thumb in shock-responsive behavior. He never asked me about any of the other traumatic experiences I've already gone through. Being sexually assaulted was the least of my worries. Needless to say, I was removed from the home, placed into another one on a farm. That family only wanted a farmhand to help with the workload. I was in no mood for this, and I revolted against the foster home. Placed into another one. Oh, joy. I'm dropped into another school, mid-year. Here comes the bullying and food thrown at me. Only this time, I don't give two shits about anything, so I fight back. Throwing kids over cafeteria tables for throwing food at me. I get suspended for fighting at least once a week. The foster home takes me to see another child psychiatrist who has this new experimental therapy for kids like me. Some type of primal scream therapy called the holding. I'm asked to lay on a blanket on the floor facing up with spotlights shone down on me and a tripod camera set up to record. My foster father lays on top of me as I'm laying face up, and my foster mother lays on top of him, both facing down at me. Two of the psychiatrist's sons come downstairs and pull my arms out straight to pin them down. For the next few hours, I'm held in this position. I fight, spit, attempt to get free, scream, yell, and answer so many questions that were being asked of me, I don't even remember. It was a couple hours before I pass out, and I wake up in the same position until I pass out again, waking up with no restraints. This would end any type of cooperation from me to this family. I'm done. Removed from the foster home and placed into my second institutional school. I'm so maladjusted and detached from the type of normal human responses and behavior. I now hate everyone and anyone around me. Fighting with my fellow dormitory mates and revolting against staff. I even gave the school the silent treatment for 2 weeks as a protest. They flew some psychiatrist in from Chicago to meet with me. I refused to talk to him as well. We didn't communicate. I left the office. He flew back to Chicago. Like I'm going to talk to a child psychiatrist with any respect ever again. I'm removed from the school for acting out and put into some foundation institutional school in Pennsylvania. Sylvester Stallone graduated from this school. This first year in the school, I was so depressed and hurting, I barely showered or washed my clothes. Incidentally, I've been doing my own laundry since age 6. No school did our laundry for us. We had to sign up for time slots each week to wash our clothes. This school was set up like a college campus. Sleeping quarters and cafeteria were in one building. The school was in other smaller buildings on the same property as the dormitory. I developed athlete's feet for wearing dirty socks for weeks on end. I developed crotch rot for not showering or washing my underwear. In the class yearbook, you can see how dirty my hair is in the photos. I just didn't care about hygiene on any level. What's the point? After fighting with staff and fellow students for 2 years, I'm removed from the school and sent to a lawn school in Poland, Maine for the next 24 months. Elan was a heavy psychological therapeutic school that had a dichotomy system set up so that kids ran the asylum overseen by staff. They had scream therapy group sessions where we got to explode verbally, violently on each other in semi-controlled small groups, with larger groups when needed to step up the therapy. They had physical boxing matches and group circles made of students to resemble the boxing ring to deal with physical bullies. Students would spy on each other in the most minutiae of details and then verbally reprimand you in private screaming sessions, breaking you down psychologically to explain why you're breaking any rule no matter how small it is. Right down to why your toothbrush might be in a different position from one day to the next. It was nearly 1984 thought police. A very intense environment to live under. If you didn't fold your clothes one day, you better expect a screaming session breaking you down for why you didn't. If you broke rules too much, you'd be put into plastic handcuffs with your hands behind your back, your shoes would be removed, and you'll be sitting in a chair facing a corner for days or weeks on end, only to have the zip ties cut for meal times and then reapplied after the meal. If you were having trouble with any type of false ego, you'd have to wear a 4-foot cardboard sign explaining your issue and encouraging fellow students to ask you about it all day long. Students would receive points every time they questioned you. No conversations were allowed between students if both of you were in a lower dichotomy. One person in the conversation has to be the upper dichotomy level, or you'll get a screaming session. You cannot walk outside or go outside without staff permission. Students guarded all exits and wrote down everything that happened to them while sitting at their posts. Students on the overnight shift would then rewrite these details all night long to be turned into staff first thing in the AM. At this point, at age 18, I have literally spent more than 365 days of my life sitting in chairs with no shoes and my hands tied by zip ties behind my back, facing a wall or a corner. I reported this treatment to my state caseworker and parents, who then proceeded to call me a liar again. After 24 months, I learned all I wanted to learn from this system. I began revolting and was removed. This school was closed for abusive children in 2011. I guess I wasn't lying. I wonder how many other things I've experienced that I wasn't lying about. I go back home to my stepdad and biological's mother's house. I had nowhere else to go. I tried college, but the idea of trying to matriculate into such a superficial and childish dynamic of normal people was not for me. I couldn't relate to the childish morality and behavior of kids my age. The director of Elan, who did teach me so much about book psychology to go with my now intensely tuned-in instincts, told me the world's mentality won't mature and catch up with me until I'm in my 50s. I've just experienced too much. To put it in some modern terms, I'm an indigo kid on steroids who's also an extreme empath who reads everything about everyone 100% of the time. You can't lie to me or hide anything from me. I now have over 85,000 hours of deep psychological and behavioral training. In my 20s and 30s, I was homeless a few times, losing everything I own. Struggling to relate to a world I never knew presented many challenges for me in my young adulthood. I had to leave my parents' house. We just have no connection, and I have no respect for them. I have battled suicide most of my adult life. I have taken drugs, hooked up exhaust hoses to my vehicles, and wished for death more times than I can tell you, even up as far as age 50. In my mind, nobody cared about me on any level. I have not done myself any favors with some of the decisions I made as an adult. I also never tried to talk to anyone. At a point, I shut down and resigned myself that there would never be anyone that I could trust and confide into. This is the biggest mistake I've made as an adult. The worst punishment that can be inflicted on humans is isolation. We crave love, compassion, and respect on an intrinsic level. To deny this to ourselves, for whatever the reason is the most damaging thing that we can do to ourselves. It was the most damaging thing to me, thinking nobody would care and nobody could relate to what happened to me. So I shut down and blocked out the world, making life harder for me at a time when I really needed some human compassion and empathy. Oftentimes, our self-inflicted wounds are the most painful. I know mine were. Is this the resume you would prefer to hear? Is this resume any less or more important than my intro resume? Does this resume still sound like I'm a narcissist? Which resume would you prefer to hear? I would like us as humans to learn one thing from my story. This modern era we live in has so much at our disposal, from smartphones to social media to AI to the internet. Yet we are more divided than ever. Being real isn't easy. It's not click-worthy or sexy. It leaves us vulnerable and goes against the false narrative most of us project in all our modern outlets. If we're being honest with each other, and most importantly to ourselves, We present these false narratives to protect ourselves from each other. After all, social ridicule is traumatic. Yet this action is alienating ourselves from each other more and more, creating even more divisions, when we're at a time when what we really need is deeper connections with each other on intrinsic levels. In my humble opinion, if we want to make real change in our society, the world, and ourselves, we need to stop hiding from our trauma, hiding it in false narratives, and begin to open up about our trauma, failures, and struggles. We will find out we are more alike this way than when we project our success. It's the failures that make us human. That's what brings our deepest bonds and connections with our best friends. Our deepest connections are derived from these heartfelt sharings of our pain, our heartaches, our trauma, and the internal dialogues of our struggles. We need to make this our selling points, our human currency to each other. We need not be afraid of being uber vulnerable to everyone, especially ourselves in the mirror. In the same vibrant manner, we post our success on social media. This is what will cause true healing and unity for us all. Expose our trauma so we can all relate. Embrace each other, feeling safe in the common bond of trauma while we do it. For this is the only true currency we all have in common. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.